Time for a Fox News alert. President-elect Donald Trump is taking his thank you tour to Des Moines, Iowa tonight. And as soon as the president-elect steps up on the stage to the microphone, we will, of course, bring it to you live. But right now, welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight, the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Well, in less than 2 weeks, a group of 538 people will officially choose the president of the United States. They are called electors, and they are specified in the Constitution. Most of us assume they are mere conduits for the will of voters and will cast their ballots consistent with Electoral College results. And yet in some states, they don't have to do that. They can do literally whatever they want. Texas is one of those states, and that's where we find Christopher Suprin. He's a Republican elector who says he will not vote for Donald Trump. Christopher joins us from Dallas. Christopher, thanks a lot for coming on tonight. So,
thank you. I'm happy to be on your new show.
Thank you. I assume this election was over and that Trump won, and you're saying no.
That's correct. December 19th is when the election actually happens.
Right.
I'm actually surprised you didn't know that. But that's when electors actually cast their ballots, and that's when we will find out who is president. Right.
I guess and of course I'm aware of that. It's in the Article 2, it's in the 12th Amendment, it's well known, the Electoral College. But the idea that the result could change based on the meeting of the Electoral College in 2 weeks, I'm not aware that that could happen, and I think most people who cast their ballots last month assumed that the result they woke up to was the one that would stand, and you're saying no.
Well, we've had multiple electors at different times in our history who have not voted either as a party wanted or as their region wanted. The last, I think it was in 2004, may have been by mistake when a Democratic elector flipped John Kerry and John Edwards.
Yeah, by mistake, right.
And perhaps in 1976 would be more applicable, where current Washington State Senator Mike Patton said rather than voting for Gerald Ford, he would make a pro-life statement and vote for President Reagan. But there are certainly times when that's happened.
Well, so but here's the problem I have with it, and I think most people would. So you had an awful lot of people vote. I think it was around 128 million people voted overall in this election, 62-ish, 3 for Donald Trump. And here you have 538 people saying, or at least in your case, one person saying, my vote counts more than any of yours, and I'm going in a different direction. It seems undemocratic, is the point I'm making.
It may be undemocratic, but it's certainly exactly what the founders established. They wanted an electoral college, per Alexander Hamilton, to say no when it was appropriate for a candidate that they felt it was not preeminently qualified to be president.
Yeah, that's not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution, as you know. There's no reference to the motives of electors in the Constitution.
Not in the Constitution,
right? Not in the Constitution, right? So, who are you going to vote for?
I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for. In the op-ed I published on Monday, I said someone like John Kasich. I'm still looking for someone with executive and legislative experience. And since the op-ed, I've been lucky to have multiple electors actually across the land call me on the phone. We've had some interesting conversations, but when the topic of who to vote for comes up, the name that keeps trickling back to the top is John Kasich again and again.
He said he doesn't want to be voted for. But again, what gives you the power to do that? I mean, the whole point of the system is that you are standing in by proxy for millions of your fellow citizens and doing their will. And you're saying, in effect, I don't care what you think. I'm doing what I want, even though my job is to stand in for you, if you see the point.
Well, I disagree with the point. It's not to stand in for someone else. There's no constitutional assumption that the Electoral College is simply a rubber stamp. Otherwise, they would have simply said the states would award those values to those candidates. Again, it's not in the Constitution, but certainly in Federalist 68, the Founding Fathers had an idea that they were worried about a demagogue taking over office, simply winning by the mob mentality. And it hasn't happened. We've been lucky in America thus far, but this year's different.
Wait, I get it, and I get you don't like Trump, and I think that's totally fine if you don't like Trump. And a demagogue is a scary prospect from either side. But do you really want a country run by 538 people who are accountable to no one? That's what you're proposing. Why is that better?
Well, I'm not proposing
yeah, you are.
that.
You're saying I should be able to vote for anybody. I have authority vested in me by, I don't know where your authority comes from. I don't know how you became an elector. And yet you're saying, just on the basis of my own conscience, I'm going to attempt to control the destiny of a country of 330 million. That seems as scary as a despotism to me.
I understand your point. In this case, I was elected at the Republican State Convention, so I can't speak to the Democratic Party in Texas or in other states for either party.
Right.
But in my case, I was elected, so there is some accountability.
Where's the accountability?
I'm not. Well, the accountability is you were elected by a body through a process.
Right.
It's
So
not really
you don't.
It's
right, but there's no accountability.
It's not a
Nothing
bureaucratic
happens to you. Sure, but I mean, nothing. There's no accountability because you can vote for whomever you want. No one can do anything to you. You can't be fined. You can't lose your job. There's no. I mean, there's literally no accountability, right?
Well, I guess that depends on the brushback you're looking at.
Well, what would the accountability be?
Well, there's certainly been a number of Twitter threats and things like that saying your political career is over, you can't run for office again, things of that nature. So electors, I'm sure, will take that into account when they vote. But I think they will also consider the future of the country, not just their own personal self-interest.
So
leaders are supposed to do.
But isn't the country supposed to be governed by its population? I mean, there are hundreds of millions of people in the country. They had an opportunity to vote. Every adult over 18 had an opportunity to vote, and more than 100 million of them did, and they made their preference clear per the rules. And you're saying, I don't care what they did, and you're moreover saying, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me make sure I heard you right. You say the nation should be governed by the population?
Yes.
Because if that's the case, we wouldn't have an electoral college. We'd have a popular vote or a national popular vote.
Well, the electoral college reflects, of course, the results in the states. So, I mean, it's not pure democracy, but it's still representing the desire of 128 million people, not 538, or in your case, 1. Here's my last question to you. You describe yourself, and I think I'm quoting, as a moral elector. You're suggesting that people who are voting for Trump in the electoral college 2 weeks from now are immoral?
No, I'm saying I'm taking a conscious decision to consider who I'm voting for. I don't think Donald Trump meets the test to be qualified to be president. And
but why frame it in moral terms?
What other terms would you prefer?
I don't know, political terms, preference. I mean, I like this guy, I don't like that guy, but instead you're bringing it to a moral level. I'm making a moral choice, and the implication is others aren't. And I'm saying, why even frame it that way? Because I mean, it brings the conversation to a different and much more heated level when you say, I'm making the moral choice, which is what you're saying.
Well, I am making a moral choice. I am choosing to examine his qualifications. There are probably other people who may be doing the same thing and coming to a different conclusion, and that's fine. That's why we have an electoral college to cast these votes.
Last question. What do you think would happen to the country, to the social fabric, to the stability of the country upon which everything else is built, if somehow the election were taken away from Trump in the Electoral College?
That's a great question, and my answer to that is the Electoral College is part of the Constitution. It follows under the rule of law, so if Mr. Trump gets 270 electoral votes, he will be president. If he doesn't, and no one gets 270 votes, it'll go to the House of Representatives as described in Amendment 12, and the rule of law will exist. For me to vote against Mr. Trump or for someone else is a legal vote, but to suggest insurrection as a source
of course, I'm not suggesting insurrection. I'm merely saying if you tell people in the end it's not a democracy and a small group of unelected people like you get to make the choice, they're going to freak out. I'm just noting that because that's the way it works. Christopher, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Have a great day.